Schicchi and Pagliacci, an insider's guide. We'll learn the following about Gianni Schicchi and Pagliacci. What is an opera? How were these operas' stories chosen? How were the lyrics written? What are the stories about? How were they composed? Who are the characters? How was the scenery chosen? How was the cast chosen? What are some of the acting challenges? Since we are performing two operas, we will explore Gianni Schicchi first, then learn about Pagliacci. Gianni Schicchi. What is an opera? A play or a story set to music. Gianni Schicchi is an Italian one-act comic opera composed by Giacomo Puccini. Its libretto, the script, is by Gioacchino Forzano, and it was composed between 1917 and 1918. How was this opera's story chosen? Gianni Schicchi's story in a nutshell. In a series of hilarious pranks, secret deals, and one ridiculous plan, Gianni Schicchi succeeds in tricking a greedy family into making him rich and assuring a comfortable future for two young lovers. At the end of the opera, Gianni Schicchi speaks directly to the audience, referring to the famous Italian poet Dante, saying, "Tell me, ladies and gentlemen, if Buoso Donati's money could have had a better end than this. For this prank, they sent me to hell, and so be it. But with the permission of the great old man Dante, if you've been entertained this evening, allow me extenuating circumstances." This opera has a fascinating historical background that helps to understand who Gianni Schicchi is and why he says that. Gianni Schicchi de Cavalcanti was an actual historical figure, a 13th century Italian knight from Florence, Italy. He was a despised member of the peasant class called the nouveau riche, a term often used in a derogatory way that describes those whose wealth has been acquired within their own generation rather than by familial inheritance. History tells us that Gianni Schicchi was a skilled impersonator. Buoso Donati, a rich widower and childless, died. His nephew Simone feared that Buoso may have made a will unfavorable to him and called upon Schicchi for advice. Schicchi had the idea of impersonating Buoso and making a new will. Simone promises Schicchi he will be rewarded, but Schicchi takes no chance and leaves a considerable sum of money and Buoso's prized lady mule to himself. Dante Alighieri was a 14th century poet and wrote the epic work The Divine Comedy, a famous poem in three parts: the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. Dante's Inferno narrates a journey through hell and is essentially a tour of various spectacular, unbelievable, and grotesque punishments to sinners for assorted sins which Dante categorizes. Dante was of pure Florentine descent and despised members of the peasant class such as Schicchi. In addition, he was married to a Donati, so it was particularly hard on Gianni Schicchi, who committed the sin Dante classified as falsification. In Canto 30, a chapter on falsification, Dante introduces two people in one of his verses, Gianni Schicchi and Mira. Dante visits the circle of impersonators and sees a man savagely attacking another. He is told the attacker is Gianni Schicchi, condemned to hell for impersonating Buoso Donati and making his will highly favorable to Schicchi. In the same verse, Dante introduces Mira, daughter of King Cinyras of Cyprus, who she fell in love with, By impersonating another person, Mira tricked her father into having an incestuous relationship with her. Here is a picture called The Pit of Disease, which depicts the verse Gianni Schicchi and Mira are mentioned in that show how the falsifiers are punished. Dante sees two pale and naked shadows, shades or ghosts, running out, biting like hungry swine. One of them, Gianni Schicchi, grabs Capocchio, another shade, by the neck with his fangs and drags him along on his belly. The other animal-headed figure on the left is Mira. Here is an English translation of Dante's verse. I saw two pale and naked shades, biting and running like pigs whenever the pigsty opens. One reached Capocchio and bit him at the knot in his neck, and dragging him, made his belly scratch the solid bottom. And the Argentine, who remained trembling, said to me, that foolish man is Gianni Schicchi, who becomes furious and mistreats others. Oh, I said to him, if the other one doesn't prick her teeth at your back, you won't find it hard to tell me who she is before she flees. And he said to me, that is the ancient soul of wicked Mira, who outside of natural familial love came to sin with her father by disguising herself as someone else, just like the other one there, who disguised himself as Buoso Donati in order to win the lady of the herd for himself, making a will and giving to the will due form. How was this opera written? Giovacchino Forzano, the librettist or the script writer, came up with the plot based on the history mentioned above and wrote the lyrics. About the librettist. Giovacchino Forzano was an Italian playwright, librettist, stage and film director. A resourceful writer, he authored numerous popular plays and produced opera librettos for most of the major Italian composers of the early 20th century, including librettos for Giacomo Puccini's opera Suor Angelica. About the composer. Giacomo Puccini was born in 1858 into an Italian musical family that spanned many generations. He learned how to play the organ and piano at a very young age and went on to study composition at the Milan Conservatory. He was known primarily for his operas and regarded as the most successful proponent of Italian opera after Verdi. His early works were in the Romantic style, but later he started composing in the Verismo style, a style distinguished by realistic, sometimes sordid or violent depictions of everyday life. Puccini's most renowned works are Tosca, La Bohème, Madame Butterfly, and Turandot, all of which are among the most frequently performed and recorded of all operas. Who are the leading characters? Gianni Schicchi is the title role. Giovacchino Forzano sought a clever way to redeem Gianni, whom Dante condemned to hell. Schicchi is a clever and shrewd peasant that is knowledgeable about laws. He is the father of Lauretta. There are many leading roles in Gianni Schicchi, many of which are part of the Donati family, greedy relatives that are all scheming to get their hands on Buoso Donati's wealth. What are some of the famous numbers in this opera? O mio bambino caro is the most famous aria from Gianni Schicchi. In this aria, Lauretta begs her father to help the Donati family so she can marry her beloved Rinuccio. Here is the aria. How is the scenery chosen? As mentioned earlier, Gianni Schicchi, Buoso Donati, and the Donati family were actual historical characters that lived in Florence, Italy in the 13th century. Therefore, the opera takes place in 1299 in a bedchamber of the wealthy Buoso Donati. Lyrical opera theater produces scenery that is as close as possible to actual places and locations where operas take place. The bedchamber scenery chosen by Lyrical Opera Theater is from a bedroom in the Palazzo d'Avanzati in Florence, Italy, and is decorated with frescoes from the medieval period that were popular in the 13th century homes. How was the cast chosen? They were chosen by their skill and their voice types. Characters' voices must be appropriate for the demands of the music. Voice classifications take into consideration such factors as range and timbre. Gianni Schicchi is a full lyric baritone, a lower male voice that is voluminous, powerful, and has a rich, dark timbre. The other characters range from some tenors, various types of sopranos, more baritones, and a mezzo-soprano. What are some of the acting challenges of Gianni Schicchi? This opera is very musically difficult with extremely fast Italian. It takes an enormous amount of practice to sing the Italian quickly enough that without thought, it just rolls out of a singer's mouth. The entrances are difficult and tricky, yet must be so thoroughly memorized that the singers can focus on the acting. And now we'll move on to the second opera, Pagliacci. About this opera. Pagliacci is an Italian opera in 2 acts composed by Ruggero Leoncavallo, who also wrote the libretto. It premiered in 1892. How is this opera's story chosen? Pagliacci is a play within a play, in which actors reenact on the stage a situation that has impinged on their personal lives. Balancing humor, romance, and darkly violent moods, Pagliacci tells the story of an acting troupe led by a jealous man who is ultimately driven to murder his wife and her lover. How was this opera written? Leoncavallo wrote the libretto for Pagliacci and composed the music. Pagliacci's theme attracted numerous dramatists involving as it does the relationship between make-believe and reality. As a matter of fact, Leoncavallo was sued for plagiarism by another author. He defended himself by explaining that he remembered a real case of murder occurring in a traveling theatrical troupe under circumstances like those presented in his opera. His father was the judge at the trial, so naturally the suit was withdrawn. About the librettist and composer. Ruggero Leoncavallo was born in Naples in 1858, the son of a magistrate. He received his education at the conservatory of his native city, studying literature under a famed Italian poet. The struggling young composer gave piano and voice lessons to keep from starving and accompanied cafe concerts. After many disappointments in his career as an operatic composer, at age 34 he wrote Pagliacci, an opera that brought him international fame. Although he composed a few other operas, Pagliacci is the only work by Leoncavallo in the standard operatic repertoire. Many considered Leoncavallo the greatest Italian librettist of his time after Boito. Who are the leading characters? There are 3 primary characters in Pagliacci. Canio, who also plays Pagliaccio, is the leader of the acting troupe that has worked hard to provide a living for those under his care. He is middle-aged, volatile, and jealous. Nedda, who also plays Colombina, is a young woman who is married to Canio and a member of the acting troupe. She is headstrong, passionate, and longs to be free to pursue another life. Tonio, who also plays Taddeo, is a member of the acting troupe in his mid-20s that is aggressive, clever, selfish, and foolish. What are some of the famous numbers in this opera? The most famous aria is Vesti la giubba, which one often sees depicted as the sad man putting on his clown makeup. Here it is. How is the scenery chosen? There is a setting description in the Pagliacci opera score that says, the action takes place in a village in Calabria in 1869 during the Feast of the Assumption, a public holiday in Italy typically held on August 15th. The scenery projection chosen by Lyrical Opera Theatre is of a quaint village, Serra San Bruno, in Calabria, the southern portion of Italy during the summer. How is the cast chosen? As mentioned above, by their skill and voice types. Canio is a difficult role to cast as it requires a rare type of tenor with a big, voluminous, dark, and powerful voice to sing it. Many tenors shy away from the role as they worry about damaging their voices by singing it. Nedda is a full lyric soprano, a lower soprano that is voluminous, dark, and rich. Tonio is a full lyric baritone, a voluminous lower male voice that is also dark and rich. What are some of the acting challenges of Pagliacci? The play that is within Pagliacci is a special type of play called Commedia dell'arte, an early form of professional Italian theater which has a lot of improvisation, jokes known as lazzi, slapstick humor, and pantomime. Companies were made up of troupes of actors, each of whom had a specific function or role. There were certain standard clown characters, such as you will see in the opera. Pagliaccio, Colombina, and Arlequin, or Harlequin, were the most common. The characters usually represent fixed social types such as a foolish old man or a devious servant, and the characters were exaggerated and would embody a mood, mockery, sadness, gaiety, confusion, and so forth. Each character in the Commedia dell'arte had a distinct costume that helped the audience understand who the character is. Conventional plot lines were written on themes such as jealousy, love, and old age. Songs and dancing were widely used. Actors in Pagliacci must study this art form to play their clown characters authentically. Discussion topics. What choices might the characters have made differently if they were alive today? Are the plots relevant to issues of our present time? If you were composing these operas between 1890 and 1918, as these composers were, how might your perceptions of them be affected by your view as an Italian? Do the cultural references feel outdated? How have the dynamics between men and women changed since then? How are political and social climates different or the same today? If you were going to produce these operas today with a contemporary 21st century perspective, what changes would you make and why? Conclusion. Puccini had long considered writing a set of one-act operas which would be performed together in a single evening and completed 3 one-act operas, Il Tabarro, Suor Angelica, and Gianni Schicchi by 1918. Of the 3, Gianni Schicchi was the one that was an immediate hit and is now the most frequently performed and widely recorded. Pagliacci received mixed critical reviews after its world premiere, but was instantly successful with the public and has remained so ever since. The work is enormously helped by the dramatic libretto which the composer himself wrote. It shows Leoncavallo's operatic gift at its most compelling. Thank you for joining us for Gianni Schicchi and Pagliacci, an Insider's Guide.